Hey everybody, Bridget Lynn Dolgoff, Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Projecto. Anyway, I was just, I wanted to do this, I don't know if this is like number 10 or something like that of my Star Kid series. Star Kid Now Adult series. Anyway, I will picture code it. I've kind of like talked about some of this stuff in the past, but I'm going to kind of bring it into like a whole picture. And it kind of is like one of the, main areas of my life and work that has been, let's just see, utilized. And I was thinking, like doing this video. Let me fix my thingy so I don't have to lean forward. But, like kind of as there are certain kinds of things that I haven't really, let's just say, I don't know why. Oh, no. Oh no. Oh, sorry. I don't want it to get worse here. All right. So there are just some things in my life that, I know about and that I don't really talk about, haven't really talked about, and may not necessarily have already processed them for public usage. So, this is basically about, we'll say my medical benefits, my health benefits, and my abilities, as far as animals and people and land and all of that, kind of where it originated, how it was activated, and then kind of how it's played out over the course of my life with, high level clients kind of thing. Okay, so when I was little, there were lots of crazy, like biblical proportion kind of activities that, surrounded me. Over the course of my life, I've had 6 major head injuries. Had a head injury when I was age 6 that literally, cracked my whole skull open. You can feel the crack, that goes all the way up. And my brain was exposed and hanging out of my head. And my mother had to pick me up like that, unconscious. Forceps used in my mouth to pull me out of the birth canal, trying to tear me apart when I was being born. So, my brain was mashed. And I always tell people that, my star family sent different people early on to fix physical damage, like a car. My body was like a car, and it would just have major accidents would happen to it. And I'm sure that it has been tough to keep me alive. I've had a tough time, keeping this body running. Just like, maybe that's why I have trouble trying to keep my van running, and all the costs, for the keep it going, is because maybe I have to change my, story about that. So that way I can just spontaneously, since I've survived. And just other crazy things, I think when I was like 7, I was literally hit in the face with a baseball bat. And I got hit in the face right about here, barely missed my nose. It did, put it off center. That's why it's kind of off center. Popped the cartilage and everything. Had a nosebleed. But it really affected my palate, in this part of my face. So just lots of crazy, crazy stuff, all targeted in the head. And then I always had this, even as an adult, in the summertime, I have this crazy thing with insects. And I just always have had that crazy thing with insects. So I've never really, been terrified of any kind of insects. And been very sympathetic to them. And, they've been used as my allies, I guess, and that they help me to communicate with the world out there. So when particular insects start to move into my area, they're indicating messages to me and signals that I, will dive into and check out. The first, major insect thing before the activation. So I just want you to know, like, that I've been crazy off the charts, not crazy in a mental way, but crazy off the charts energetically, my whole life before the activation. And so my dad that raised me when I was like about 3 years old, we lived in this place where there were there could be monster, red ant piles, right? Where billions of really hostile red ants. And in some cases, you learn kind of in areas where you have that, or the desert, people learn to poison, put gas in those holes and, burn them to, teach the ants that this is not a good place to be, because they can actually, kill. They could kill a horse. Those kinds of ants, activate lickety split. They can cover whatever they need to cover in a matter of minutes, seconds, start biting and taking it over, poison, the systems, and kill. So, there are some things in certain places of the world that when you grow up, you learn, like, you don't stick a stick in a red ant pile and make them mad. You avoid them at all costs. And when you do see them, you tell your parents, or, your family within your area of land is going to be paying, direct attention to those piles so they're not moving towards the house. It's like, I've told a story about my great grandmother on my mom's side who, managed a whole den of rattlesnakes that were under the cabin. Because they wouldn't leave. They didn't take the hint, like, it's time to kind of move on. So there are just certain things that you have to watch, in a nature setting. So when I was around age 3, my dad came outside. The neighbor had a red ant pile that was kind of, since it was open on the front side, and then there was a fence, it would have been on their side of the fence, but there was no fence there. The fence went like this. And then I was like right here, came out of the front house. And I ended up standing on top of the red ant pile, like in a trance. So this happened quite a bit. I mean, I was extremely abnormal for this world. Let's just say that. And I can't even imagine what it would be like for a family to contain that. I mean, I'm not really sure I could contain a child like that personally. So, and he came running out of the house because people were screaming, the neighbors or something like that. And he came out of the house and he ran, because he was like, ex-military when he was young. And any screaming or anything going on, man. He was like Johnny on the spot. Confrontation, whatever needed to happen. He always took over all situations. He was an exceptional leader and protector and provider. He worked his ass off. So, anyway, he came running out, and I'm standing on the red ant pile, probably with my arms up. I guess I had this thing where I would stand around and twirl and put my hands up in the air and, sometimes sing in different languages or, stuff, just a lot of stuff that maybe this world, because of rigorous, religious belief systems, people have a hard time being able to look outside of their box to see, gifts and talents and abilities that some of us have, and I'm not saying that like I'm all powerful. I have a skill set. I have a spirit, soul skill set that was sent here with. And I think, a lot of that potential probably is not going to make it into this world because this world's not changing fast enough. And it should have changed a lot faster. So it's, dragging its ass. So there's a lot of potential, I think, in some of us that have been, sent here, deployed here into biosuits that aren't going to be able to serve out their, all their skills and abilities and, fix the planet. So, that all that nuclear stuff is still in those timelines. So I don't understand why everyone's just dragging their feet, I mean, it all boils down to that money and power. Who gets to stay in money and power? I don't care if you're good and I don't care if you're bad. It's all about power and control and manipulation. It isn't about the earth, for sure. It isn't about our place in whatever structures there are. Okay, so anyway. So my dad came running out. People were screaming, not me. And I was covered. There wasn't any spot on me that wasn't covered with red ants. And he freaked. I mean, he must have been like, Jesus Christ, can't you stay alive? I mean, why are you trying to kill yourself? Why are you trying to do these kinds of things? Why do I have to like swoop in and save you all the time? Why are you so crazy? Like what is wrong with you? And so, I mean, I don't know what he thought, right? But we had a bond, even, more so than any of his kids that he had, even the biological ones, we always had this incredible, solid bond kind of a thing. So he grabbed me off the ant pile, ran me, and put me up on the tailgate of the truck, took all the clothes off, and took a cold ice hose, ran over, put it all together, and just sprayed me down from head to toe. And I remember later on in life him saying, not really talking about the whole incident, but him saying, it was just so darn shocked that you didn't have not one ant bite. Not one. And I think it's because I've always had this weird kind of relationship with insects and bugs, and that they knew that I wasn't a threat. And I've been in situations with animals too, where, they may be still pretty angry and aggressive or stressed out or whatever's going on, but they also know that I'm not a threat to them. And I think with the ants, that they were checking me out, right? And you know what? Maybe they were part of the activation, by going all up over me and touching all my different meridian points. And I know that ants and flies have a tendency to clear our skin. They can actually take debris off of us and unclog pores. And also, that material can feed them as well, because it has a lot of minerals and, metals and things like that are really good, beneficial for their diet. So maybe they were cleaning me up. Maybe they were helping my physical body. Maybe they were, running some meridian lines. I mean, they covered me up 100%. And, I think it's just really difficult for people to kind of gather that kind of information, but I think it is what it is. So I always kind of had like this really trippy deal going on, and then, kind of went one step further. So during the activation between age 4 and 5, I had a reoccurring stigmata. And it was a type of what they call a burn stigmata. But I've looked online, when I was around 15, 16, I started sending the Vatican a lot of letters. I wanted more information about the stigmata, the blood stigmatas and the burn stigmatas, and because obviously I don't understand a lot about this world. And so I don't understand. At those times I didn't understand, what those things were and kind of what they meant. And people online had weird bird stigmatas, like holographic kind of stuff, like didn't really look like it served any kind of purpose. And the other part was I couldn't smell it. And so I know for a fact that real stigmata has a rose smell. It smells like the most beautiful, fragrant roses. And, I know that sometimes when the energies of, like, say, Mother Mary are activated, and especially this Saint Teresa. Boy, did she have a killer book. I read her book a long time ago, and she had lots of demonic activity, and then eventually went into the convent extremely young, and that activity continued through, and she constantly was fending the energies off, and that there's a lot of stuff that talks about, when she's helping and her energy is activated, that there's also some pretty intense, smelling of roses, like, really beautiful rose smells. So I don't know if it's because, you have these beings who there's some kind of activation in this world, because those are part of the laws that govern, and the data information and plugins and software that's been downloaded into the bigger software systems So I think that's kind of like part of how it is. So anyway, I processed this world and the global consciousness from day one. I was chronically ill. A lot of the stuff seriously affected my lungs. I mean, I could just go from being perfectly fine and in 5 hours having like things like full blown pneumonia, um, because of all of the heavy energies, on the planet and in the people and the collective. And so, like my whole life, I barely survived. Um, so many times in my life, medical professional told my parents to take me home because there was like zero anything that they could do or offer, you know. And then, somehow once I'd processed that energy, then I would get healthy immediately. But it made it for a really awful childhood. I mean, thank God I had a family who allowed me to explore, to go on my bike, even at a young age, and go out into the desert, um, and do things. I had a lot of freedom and a lot of space to pursue, my own thoughts, and do my own, like scientific, studies and research. So it was pretty, always, I think, was by myself. I was solo. So, when the activation came, I got really sick. And so from age 4 to 5, I got, I'm not even sure what I had. But every time I get sick like this, I get so sick that I don't remember parts of being super, super sick, you know? So during the stigmata period, I can remember like my whole family being at the house, kind of like my mom saying, "Oh yeah, she's really sick" or whatever else, and doesn't look good, and she's not really that coherent, and that like all the women, on my mom's side, or my great grandmother, my grandmother, they would boom show up Johnny on the spot, or when I get really, really sick, they had already gotten there, because they were tapped in. They knew exactly what was going on. So, and they would do amazing things. They would clean the house. They would help my mom. They would cook meals. That's one thing I have to say about the women in my family were that, they jumped in, pulled up their sleeves, and, helped each other, on all different kinds of levels. So, I can remember them always kind of, coming in, when I'd be super sick. I can remember my grandmother and my great grandmother working on me, you know, um, like prayer, faith healing, also herbal medicine. I remember one time my great grandmother or my grandmother came, made this two mixtures she would make. One was to drink, and she'd always make it really sweet with honey. And she'd sit and make sure that I drink it. And then she would rub me down with this alcohol concoction that she would make. Um, rub everything down and my whole body, and continue to do that. She was just Johnny on the spot. So these 3 times between 4 and 5 is when the stigmata part hit, and I had what are burn stigmatas. Mine were symbols though, and I'd wake up from these really intense fevers and sickness, and the burns from the heat in my body burnt out my feet, and looked like, sometimes looks like some kind of internal branding, and then the rose smell, and all that other stuff. So that happened 3 times over the course of 4 to 5. And I can remember, looking at the bottoms of my feet, and when the stigmatas were healing for the last, when I had gone through it the last time. And each foot had kind of a different symbol on it. Singular symbols, but together they make another symbol. And basically, over time in this, reality, I've had to figure out the rules and the things that govern. And basically, the two symbols coming together symbolize this reality. So, two components. One maybe from here and one from out there coming together for here, activated for here in this time frame on this planet. So, yeah, there's no coincidences. So I can remember picking, at the skin that was starting to flake off. It was almost healed, but it gets, get itchy. I remember my grandmother saying, "Don't pick at that thing, don't pick at it. Let's put some salve on it. Don't pick at it." I think she was afraid it would like break off and go deep, and then I'd have some kind of infection, and then they have to save me again. Don't touch it. Don't pick at it. But I can remember looking at it, especially on my right leg, on my right foot, kind of a thing. So, yeah. And then what happened is that, my powers became like mega. And I started raising bugs from the dead. And this is when I started really, becoming like a researcher. And a resurrectionist, right? A resurrectionist, researcher, regenerator, restorer. Kind of a lot of those kinds of words that fit in, and how we reboot things. How do we start things back up, and when the systems fail, and how those systems work here. And so I learned early on in this world that things weren't finite, especially with bugs. You didn't just die. You could come back. You could resurrect. And I'm not talking about like zombie resurrection. I'm talking full resurrection. And that a lot of the reason why things were wrong was because of the energetic systems that surrounded the being would be depleted rapidly. And then this would cause the whole system collapse and death. So I was raising bugs from the dead. So I'd find bugs that early on I tried to raise bugs from the dead that, I wanted to really fix them. It had a broken wing, or like, died from smashing into a wall. I wanted to take that back. I wanted to take that wall was there that they could smash into. And those kinds of resurrections, they never really worked out. And if they did come back, they seemed like they suffered more because they couldn't really fully, hydrate them, back to before they went into the wall. So didn't have that capability. And so always was kind of known as a person my whole life that would go out and save animals that were, like sick and dying. Especially I always found the ones that were like, headed down the death path. I remember I found this dove outside in a snowstorm that, was like frozen to the ground. And I gently and carefully got her unadhered and brought her in the house and put her in a box. And I blow dried her, and I probably scared the shit out of her, but she probably felt like, oh God, it was so warm. At first it scared her, but then after a while, the blow dryer, she liked it because it was warm and covered her all up. And she was having these tremors. And I remember a friend of mine who was like, Joe Bob Hunter comes in and looks at the bird and was like, that's like death quiver. I was so like hurt because I was like, I'm gonna, you know. Then I started learning more about prayers from other cultures and belief systems that hold the living beings in your hands and you pray for them in certain ways, um, while they go through their death process. And that was helpful to me. So, just there were some bugs that were resurrectable and some not. Grasshoppers never. And then I learned on later on in life that they only hop forward. So when they die, they've already hopped backwards. So, and then when you're resurrecting them, you're taking them back to a later timeline, and that's not the kind of energy that they have. So they're in this reality, they're not. You can't regenerate them. The bees always did good. Bees have always been big protectors of me. And I think, go back and look at, meat bee attack. It was very traumatic a few years ago on some land I was working on. I got attacked basically by a whole hive of underground meat bees, which was like, whoa. It was really emotionally upsetting. But once I realized that they could have killed me, I realized that they actually were helping me. And I was going through a really tough period up until that point. And they helped to, were the catalyst to turn that around, I think. Would I want to go through it again? Hell no. But, it was another major activation and regeneration of me and my body moving forward. Because you got to take in the poison, right? So the best medicine here is the snake medicine. You transmute the poison. So you transmute the poison, which is the illness, and the illness is the medicine. The illness is the poison, and then it becomes the medicine. And the medicine can be the poison, and the illness could be. So, anyway, just a thought about that. So, in my life, how this has played out, I've had clients in the past, a long time ago, and I always gave them the choice, even if they were bad guys, or however you want to talk about them, hybrids, deep state, bad guys, I don't know, controllers. I always ended up with some of these people in my practice. It's what happens when you're kind of gifted, right? There was a point in my career, though, where I could have gone off and I could have, worked for football leagues, individual players kind of a thing, working on them. I didn't want to do that. There was a time period where I could have worked on high-level politicians that were coming in and out of the area, and I decided against that. It was a period where I had tons of attorneys and doctors and those kinds of people in my practice. And eventually I weaned them all out, or, weeded them all out as well. And then, I've also had, professional sports people, which, I eventually weeded out. And I've had some high profile hybrids, extraterrestrial human. And I've had, high level functioning controllers and handlers and people that, billionaire types, which I weeded out. And so one of the things is that, if they chose to be kind of on the light side, and I could tell where their energies were. And it took me a while, though. I had a lot of heartbreak when, I'd invest, so much time and energy into people, and then they would turn. And it was irrefutable turning, and no possible working it out kind of a turning. But I would actually keep them alive and protected. As long as they were getting worked on by me regularly, I could defeat any type of illness, pain, viral, whatever. It didn't matter. And so I gave these people giant immune systems, and protected them and cured them from a lot of stuff before it would happen. And I remember having a huge falling out with one of these people. And it took him years to really realize what had happened. Because now he was in the degeneration cycle, and I wouldn't take him back as a client. And he said, all those years you kept me alive against all odds. I said, yeah, you can't live a CEO lifestyle and eat all that terrible food and travel 24/7 and not get any sleep and deal with all that kind of stress and not die. Something. So that's kind of how my abilities have played out in medicine, energetic instructional medicine, and how it plays out into animals as well. Animals are way easier to regenerate. Probably the easiest. Four-leggeds, awesome. And babies, regenerations, as long as is pretty good too, but not as bad, not as good as four-legged animals. They have amazing healing qualities in them, and beauty. Let's just say that. Beauty. So that's kind of how things would play out. And I have a huge education. I have 25 in this reality, over 25 certifications. I've done Western medicine, alternative medicine. I've done wilderness medicine, where you have to literally, piece people back together in case something happens and the people can get back into the backcountry. I, have done some Western medicine stuff. I have, CEUs, credits, if I could put it all together, I'd probably have at least 2 doctorates in my type of medicine. And, I talked about in the last video I did for the thyroid video, 6 part 2, about lateralization and your physical structure. So you can go back and evaluate those videos. And then I'm just trying to see. So I'll just tell you a last story before we head out. When I was around 20, this would have been before I left the area, Reno. And so I probably was around, I'm going to say I was probably around 22 maybe. I don't know. 24, I don't know. Somewhere in there. And I had a client that had brain cancer, and he had I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he had went and tried a whole bunch of other stuff, and then he contacted me and asked me if he could make an appointment, get to Reno, see me, and he was going to stay in Reno for a couple months or whatever else. Sometimes people go past the point of recovery, and you have to, take whatever steps are necessary to help them and guide them and do the best that you can. So basically what happened is he came into my practice to see me, and we put him into a sleeping trance, which I did a lot. And then I'd work on him physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And he had some teachers, beings, or whatever that were manifesting through his filter of the stream. And so, because this is how his brain dealt with information and data that came out of the stream. And so the beings appeared as forms. Or the data or the information appeared as forms due to his own mind. So I worked with the forms. And the forms were telling me about how that all this brain cancer stuff is linked to this hook off his DNA. Mind you, vaccines create hooks. Viruses create hooks. There's all kinds of weird things that create hooks off the DNA. And then the DNA replicates these hooks. And emotional stuff can, if it's violent enough, if it's aggressive enough, if it's over a long enough period of time, then it will create a hook. And then it replicates. So the disease, the sickness, the illness on all levels replicates over and over and over again. And you may also have gotten this hook because it's hereditary. The hereditary ones are a lot harder to get rid of. That programming, especially you're into like 5 generations. Oh my God. So anyway, so I was sent in there to take a look. I might lose this, so I might have to do a second video, and I apologize for that. Because I didn't want it to go into a number 2, but I only have so much storage. Anyway, so the forms, the data and information were sent me in. They grabbed me and sent me into his body. And we're looking at the hooks, and this is when they first started describing the hooks to me, and this particular hook. So it like happens in seconds. You go in, information is like hits you, you see everything, all the components, you come out. That's why I like Steiner's work and some of his meditation practices, like, because that's how, when I do some of this work, it is. You go in, they show you how it's all created, and then how it's all torn apart, and how to dismantle it to cause, regeneration or whatever else that you're trying to achieve. And so so anyway, so what happened was that I went in, I saw the main hook that was causing the problem with the cancer, and the forms told me that, he's not going to heal from the brain cancer. It's gone too far. And now he's like, there's part of him that's succumbed to the fact that he's probably going to die. So, it's like game over. And it's okay, right? It's all okay. But then they said, we want you to go out of the body, and we want you to make these statements to him, because there doesn't need to be suffering here as this process evolves. And I was like, okay, great. So I came out, I kind of woke him up from the trance, and I forget what I said to him, but it was about his past and his family. And so they said, just say this, blah, 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 blah. And I did. And then I could see like his body twitch a little bit, his body respond in kind of like a really simple way. And if you go back to my client Mo video, I wrote some of that underneath the video about watching the dog and certain things I say, and I can see how she twitches. So I can tell if she's released that pattern or whatever's happened to her or trauma event or not, just by talking about that event. So anyway, same kind of idea. So I blap it out, and he does a gentle response to it. And then they grab me, they throw me back in, and I see that the hook is gone. So when he came out of it, I just said, look, I've done the best that I possibly can for you to create the least amount of suffering. And I'm going to give you the number of a medical doctor that is a wonderful person, and I think that you need to go see her here in town and make an appointment with her and go and see her. And he did, and then he started his process. hospice kind of deal. And they medicated him, which was really good because he was going to go that process. So in my world, I wish I had more doctors to work with. I wish I had more, you know, trained, formally trained people to work with. In the past, I've even worked with psychiatrists, I've worked with psychologists, I've worked with people who, can't help the person or can't make a dent. I've worked in settings where, we've worked together with a person to help them, to produce all the components that are needed. And I've worked in mini clinics with other, brilliant and amazing people as an equal. So, because what I bring to the table is completely unusual and different. And now, it's kind of like, well, it was my work before I came here, but it's like my life work. And so I would consider myself, I don't know, a galactic physician, or I'm not really sure how that would play out, but something to that effect. And I really believe, like, if my life had been a lot easier and different, like, I would have gone for maybe a sociology degree, PhD, or something like that. But I do have enough, education, continued education, probably to have at least two PhDs, specializing in what I specialize in. And like I said, there's not really anybody who understands structural medicine. And it's a shame, especially in the USA. And I imagine probably Great Britain and a lot of other countries. So, but it's something that is profound. And I think that the Asian societies, I mean, it's kind of like almost like the basis of, energy and structural medicine is kind of like the basis foundation of most of their, ancient type medicines.